Welcome everyone to this week's episode of 5710 podcast. This week's guest, Karen Pickering, Director of Page & Park, has an extensive portfolio of health and higher education projects. For over 25 years at Page & Park, Karen has overseen the Scottish office's transition into employee-owned practice, as well as completing acclaimed projects such as the Lindburn Centre and the Hawkhead Centre. So we'll just kind of start off with the obvious one. You've been in Page & Park a long time, and you've gone, was it 25 plus years, something like that?
28 years I've been there, yeah.
So you must have gone through some changes, technologically wise, culture wise. Could you kind of talk through the kind of the big ideas of, when you started and then what it is now? Because it's massively changed,
when we started, we were a practice of just like 7 people.
Wow,
so it was really small, and we all had drawing boards, everything was hand drawn. We had one computer.
What was it, an old Mac?
I don't even know what it was. We had one computer in the whole office. We used to use stencils. We had a fax machine. And we wrote letters all the time. But generally, we were on the phone a lot.
Really?
The phone used to ring a lot.
Contractors or clients?
Clients, contractors, QSs, everybody was on the phone always. So it was much more face-to-face.
Okay.
And back then, contracts, it generally was traditional contracts where architects were the boss.
Yes.
And project managers didn't really exist.
No, it's kind of a modernish.
Yeah.
Fees, and no emails either.
Yeah, no emails.
No,
fees were very good. I'm thinking, I'd been at Page Park for 3 months, it's a smaller practice. We had an office trip to New York for 5 days.
Lovely.
So that was the time when it was a young practice. The partners were in their 30s. I was in my kind of 20s. And we just all went off.
You did a grand tour of...
It was just New York and just out and about around the kind of, Manhattan, but then going a bit further out. And then obviously, once the computers came in, I was quite resistant to stop drawing because I love drawing.
Yeah,
that's the great thing about...
Had you used the computer in personal at all? Or is it
No, I'd not got a computer at home. We didn't even have any training. We were literally told, right, we're going to start using CAD, we're going to start... And we still had a drawing board.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But we had we had Macs, that was the only saving grace. It was all Apple Macs. It's quite trendy.
Yeah.
So
the big Macs with the coloured backs.
That kind of we had those, and that was all quite trendy. And to begin with, we had the horrible grey boxes. Of course, it was way back in the early 90s.
And they must have been terribly slow, no?
Really slow, but then we were slow, so it didn't matter.
So it was a pace,
And so, I kind of learnt on the job, which was fine. And then obviously, the practice got bigger, and that's what I noticed about the change, in that when we became a bigger practice, culturally it did change. Because...
For the better, for the worse?
I think, different. I don't know better. I always think the golden age was when we were smaller. And
is it that because you could picture everyone, you knew everyone?
Yeah, and we all worked together, whereas obviously you got bigger.
It became maybe almost two small practices in the same roof.
You actually became little practices, mini practices within the office. And then fees got tighter.
Of course.
There's been 3 recessions since I've been at Page Park, and every time the fees get tighter and tighter. So there was fewer trips and fewer, bonuses and all those things. That's all in the past now. And technology's changed so quickly.
Of course, yeah.
With the advent of email, nobody speaks to each other anymore. Everything's got to be recorded in writing. So everything's in email. Even if you have a phone conversation, you've got to follow it up with an email. So I find it's become a lot less personable.
Yeah, obviously the emails is to do with liability most of the time.
Yeah.
When before it was emails, was liability not really considered a thing? Was there less lawsuits? Was there less?
I think there was. I think it was more trust-based, whereas now we've all got to be more conscious of our, the legal aspects of things. And obviously for me, I've just moved up in seniority, so I think about the golden era when I had no responsibility, no staff to worry about, and could just draw. Whereas now I really do very little drawing as such. I get to do sketches and things like that, but it's generally bringing in the business, because I'm head of business development, and also looking after the staff, that everyone's happy in their work, as an experience, not just as a job. So there's lots of aspects to where I am now.
And can you picture not a favourite one in terms of the whole world, but like in terms of the little job you enjoyed doing the most? Obviously, you're people manager now, and
I think
obviously
the
doing
last
the
job,
drawings. Was there a role you found most enjoyable?
Yeah, the last job that I actually was involved with right at the beginning to do the actual concept sketch to actually delivering on site, I did in 2008.
Okay.
And it was the headquarters to the Loch Lomond and Trossachs National Park Authority in Balloch. Beautiful building.
Balloch's a lovely part of the world, isn't it? Yeah.
And it was BREEAM excellent. It was super sustainable. You know, it got biomass boiler, sheep's fleece insulation, green oak frame, natural timber, natural stone. That was lovely. And that was before I then went into a management director level, and then it all changed. So yeah, that was my kind of, I suppose, from a personal architectural position, that was the most satisfying bit. Yeah. But then I have a different satisfaction now, just seeing the practice evolve and seeing our architects evolve as well.
Do you enjoy the development of people within your office?
Yeah, it's good. It's good to nurture people, and it's sad when they leave. That's always very heartbreaking, but I think that's the nature of practice nowadays as well. People are more, I suppose, transient. When I started work, you know, it was like to work for a good practice, that was me. I thought this is my job for life because I love it. Whereas architecture is a job for life, but people, I think, now want to shop and change a bit more. That might be a generational
thing as well. That tends to be common in young people. They want to swap jobs very often.
Yeah.
Less satisfied, I
that's
suppose.
It.
Like,
and then there's always more money, there's always different experience.
Yeah,
so that's a different change as well, that we've got a lot more kind of turnover of staff, not because they're unhappy, it's just that they fancy a change.
Yeah, and is that something you look for when you're bringing in new staff? Obviously you can't really tell if someone's going to stay, but do you try and find people that might, you know, they maybe have a sort of stable-ish base to go from and they might want to stay?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit, again, of background about how Page Park has changed is when I first joined, we were a partnership.
Yeah, of course, David Page
and Brian Park. And then in 2014, we became an employee-owned business. So that was a big change in that there was no partners anymore. There was a board of directors, which obviously were running the practice, but really everybody is seen as an owner.
Okay,
so you've kind of got control of your own destiny. And I think we emphasise that to new staff that, you know, when you join this practice, we're not the bosses. We kind of manage everybody, but you actually can change your own destiny within this practice. If you want to, you know, investigate a certain type of architecture or have a certain interest in something, we can encourage that for you. And you can make your job what you want it to be.
Does that help almost R&D a little bit? You know, it kind of pushes. You know, if you find someone that's really interested in a certain type of detailing, they can kind of push it, and that grows the whole practice a little bit.
I mean, it started off, there was a group that were really into our graphic output, and so they're called the Jelly Beans. and it's been going now for about 7 years, and different people join and different people leave it, but they really focus on making our graphic output better. So it's not just about architecture, it's about how everything looks, that we, you know, reports, PowerPoints, all of that.
And they have a role in the social media and
they do the social media stuff. So they actually, the kind of the group that started that, they got a little bit of kind of like a little bonus for doing that, to show that invention. And then we've got staff that are interested in like sustainability, so they get a little bit of extra money for pushing that side of things. People that are more involved with the design review process. So there's lots of different aspects to our practice that you can get involved with. And if you show a little bit that you're taking on a bit more responsibility, you actually get a slight increase in your kind of salary level because of that.
Also allows you to kind of focus on what you're interested in to a certain degree as well.
And also being employee owned, at the end of every year, if we make a profit, we then share the profit with all the employees, whereas in the past the partners would just share the profit between themselves. So it has changed the culture of the business.
And obviously you went from 2 partners, I believe, I don't know what it was.
Well, there was 4. It started with 2, then they became 4. And now there's 2 partners remaining, but they're only part-time. They're 2 or 3 days a week now.
And what's that like, having them come in? I'm assuming David Page is maybe one of them.
Yeah, well, David, I mean, obviously he's our mentor.
Are they big presences or are they a bit more? Is it like having the teacher come back?
It's almost like having your tutors like you have here, because we have a studio type system in our office that David will come in and we have a review. So you know, you have reviews of your projects. he'll come in and every week we'll have certain projects reviewed and he'll give a critique. So we'll work away during the week and then present the following week.
Never
and
changes,
he'll make suggestions. So yeah, David's still very influential with our design. He's our design mentor, but because he's not here every day now, we've got a little bit more freedom to develop our architecture.
Yeah, push it to where you want to.
So and that's with every individual, really.
One thing I wanted to ask you about, you've done a few projects for the Scottish War Blinded, and obviously that must bring on totally different brief directives, with different qualities of the human being you're designing for. Do you think it's good for a practice that is growing and relatively big in terms of Scotland to have these sort of new design challenges every once in a while to sort of spur imagination, and rather than just doing office buildings after office buildings, having a new type of client maybe is what I'm asking for?
Well, definitely, because with that client in particular, how visually impaired people experience space is different to people with good sight. So you have to think very carefully about acoustics, colour contrast, and also the mental map of a building. So a building has to be very easily navigated and without lots of corridors and changing in direction, and so you have to design in a very simple way.
Okay.
So that actually makes you, I suppose, pare your design down. Although when I'm going to be talking this evening, I'm going to show a couple of buildings that we did, and even though they're very easy to navigate, they were quite extravagant. But that was just in the kind of the roofscape. The actual building plans were quite simple.
The systems of it, the circulation.
And the acoustics are the key things. That was always quite. We had a lot of acoustic input. But the clients themselves, with the Scottish War Blinded, we had a lot of user group interaction. We would meet with visually impaired people. We'd actually, instead of, we can't present plans, we would present almost like a plan which had like all the walls
an
made.
extruded plan,
So you could feel where the walls were, and they could offer advice on, we think that that should change and that should change, because they could imagine the space.
And has it encouraged you to look for clients that are a bit different, to keep going with that expansion of creativity? That sounds like that changes the way you design and changes the design process, keeps it fresh.
I think
is it a sort of lucky stumble?
I think it's been lucky. I mean, with that client, it was actually an RIAS competition that we were invited. It was, I think, one of 6. We were invited to bid for that, and we won the first project for them, and so that was quite lucky. But then other clients have seen our work, and especially the work for the Scottish War Blinded, and have asked us to bid for projects because of our creativity. So I think, all our projects are different. We don't have a set style, I would say.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
And I think that's because the personalities of all our architects shine through with their buildings.
That must help to help the culture of that employee-owned thing. Everyone can see a bit of themselves in their building rather than the house
this
style,
is the style. Yeah.
Is that an intentional thing, or is it sort of happen naturally for the different sectors of it?
It just naturally evolved within the practice. I mean, David's always been the design partner, but even when I was a younger architect, he would let me have my own style. And my style is very different to other architects in the office. I mean, I quite like quite organic kind of forms, and we've got other architects who like very straight lines, and we've got such an eclectic portfolio, which is great.
Excellent,
And it means that our architects do feel that they have their own design input into projects, that it's not just following the house style.
Yeah. Changing topic a little bit, a few years ago you did the 50 George Square, I believe, in Edinburgh.
Yes.
And that was a modernist retrofit almost.
Yeah.
And there's quite a few up in Aberdeen University, and a few for... Do you think universities have the appetite to redo modernist buildings? And
I hope
that brutalist style?
We've got another one on site at the moment, and I've got another one that's going to be happening in a few years' time. I hope that how we've reimagined 1960s brutalism buildings will then influence other universities, because I think they're fantastic.
I love them, yeah.
50 George Square was grim. It was, I remember when we went to the site visit, when we first won the project, it was like relentless corridors, doors off, no natural daylight in the circulation. It was like, what's that horror film? Is it with Jack Nicholson, is it?
Oh, The Shining.
The Shining,
That's
like
right.
all those doors and then the axe coming through the doors kind of thing.
It wasn't that bad.
It was grim. So what we did was totally transform the inside,
Mhm.
you know, opened it up, got daylight in, brought roof lights in, and on the outside it was B-listed, so we couldn't really do much, but we put a new roof kind of penthouse on, a new element on top of the lecture theatre, and it just transformed the building.
Mhm.
We obviously cleaned the stone and gave it new windows. And it functions so fabulously. There's another building that we're looking at, which is a 14-storey tower block, 1960s, category A listed.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And you wouldn't be able to build that in Edinburgh anymore. You know, I mean, they're amazing areas. You know, the space that these buildings contain. So you might as well keep them and give them a new lease of life. One building that we're working on, it's on site at the moment, is on Bristow Square in Edinburgh, and it's the new Wellbeing Centre. And what we're doing is, it's the Morris and Stedman building.
Oh, yeah.
We've actually just painted it with Kime paint and then put this new kind of portico, entrance portico on the front, which has really made it friendlier to enter. But just painting it a lovely kind of off-white, it's so sculptural now. Whereas before it was like,
sort of harshness of
it was dirty grey, it was stained, it was grim. It now just looks like a sculpture.
It sounds like Edinburgh's got a good appetite for it. I hope
Yeah.
Aberdeen continues, because Aberdeen U's got some lovely ones. The zoology building in particular is really nice. So.
And I think
they're kind of getting to that age where a lot of them need to be redone. Yeah.
Yeah, well, like I say, a number in Edinburgh are listed because they're pretty brutal, but they were very important for their time. And I think they are the listed buildings of the future, and they are very sculptural.
And they're very unique, as you say, and you couldn't build them again.
Yeah.
It's just,
yeah, I mean, some of them are terrible, so don't keep them all.
Course, yeah.
But, you know, the good ones, I think we need to keep them because it's part of our rich heritage.
Okay. I think it was about a year ago, the White House appeared on the Scotland Home of the Year. That must have been quite a shock, because it was finished in, 2010, 2008?
Yeah.
And then it reappeared this year, is it?
Yeah, it was
Projects Never Leave
interesting.
You.
I mean, that building was, the client were lovely. I mean, the couple, I know that the husband sadly died, but they were a great client to have, because they really said to us, you know, this is our brief, but we have no idea of what we want the house to look like. We have no style. You just design what you think is right for our brief and for the setting. And that's hence why we came up with the spheres, almost like little kind of the towers.
Almost a bit like that, yeah.
And obviously the library was...
Rotunda,
the library was an important room for them, and that was a circular, you know, room with all the books around. So, and obviously the views were amazing. So with the circular forms and with the big picture windows, you actually get an amazing view from all the rooms.
And did you know it was going to come back, or did you just see it on the telly one day?
It was interesting at the time. We didn't put it in for that many awards because we're not known for our individual houses, so I don't think we knew which awards to put it in for. But it was the lady, the owner herself, that put it in for the awards. And I don't know at the time whether it was maybe a bit too avant-garde, I don't know, but I think now it's just of its time now. It doesn't seem to be too kind of, you know,
I know it seems
different.
Quite relaxed, You don't look at it as extravagant, you look at it as almost serene.
And I think because there are so many private houses now with, you know, and grand designs and everything that are kind of out there. You know, it seemed that it was the time was right for it to become Home of the Year.
Oh, it did. It won, yeah. A question we ask most of our visiting architects, all of them except for last week, is the recommendations for a grand tour. You mentioned New York earlier. A lot of students at the end of their semester or at the end of the part one, they go...
I've got a list here.
Fantastic, yeah.
Although I suppose it's not, and I'm not so widely travelled actually, mainly just because I've got kids and all that, and they just like going to Europe and things, but... I mentioned the New York trip that we went on when I first started at Page Park, and I do remember what was really striking and did have an influence on me was the Louis Kahn Art Gallery at Yale University in New Haven. That's really beautiful.
Is that outside, a bit outside?
Yeah, that's out of New York, so we did get a train out to see that. And again, another building that I did go and see when I was a student was the Aldo Rossi Cemetery in Moderna in Italy. Because when I was a student, postmodernism was all the rage.
Of course, yeah.
I know that must seem like terrible news to all
postmodernism doesn't get a good reputation.
But I was quite into postmodernism, and when I first started at Page Park, they were quite into postmodernism. They just finished the Italian Centre in Glasgow, and if you go into the inner courtyard, that's got some Aldo Rossi type kind of nuances. And then staying with Italy, obviously the Castel Vecchio in Verona by Carlo Scarpa. That's
quite a few visited that last year.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And then a few historic ones, because I am actually quite, well, with working with a lot with heritage buildings. When I finished at the Mackintosh School of Architecture, I won a scholarship, the Sir John Kinross Travelling Scholarship, and I was in Florence for 3 months, which was great. And all I had to do was produce a sketchbook.
Really?
And so I sketched every day. And I do remember going into the Medici Chapel in Florence, which is by Michelangelo. And that's actually really modern. If you look at it, it's all kind of black and white or grey and white. And to say that, whatever the date was, it really is quite modern in a modernist way.
Efficient almost.
Yeah, compared to all the Baroque type extravaganza of the Renaissance. No, so that again is a beautiful interior.
So at the end of the 3 months, did you just hand a little sketchbook over? I'm assuming you couldn't do big.
What I had to do was, I think they were A3 sketches. They were all watercolours that I did. I had to hand in my sketchbooks, and it was from the Royal Academy in Edinburgh. And they chose, I think, 5 or 6 sketches which they cut out of the sketchbook, and they've put into their collection for this scholarship. So I have some work in the Royal Academy.
Sounds like a good 3 months.
Yeah, and I think it was about £1,500 a scholarship. It's quite a lot of money. So that paid for everything, in my accommodation, my flights, and just being an artist. And then actually coming back closer to home in Britain, there's a lovely little art gallery near where I grew up, actually, in Nottinghamshire, which is the Portland Art Gallery in the Welbeck Estates.
I don't know.
And it's Hugh Broughton Architects. I think Hugh Broughton does a little bit like our work at Page Park. It's quite sensitive. It's usually in a kind of historic location with, listed buildings. But it's new build, but it's really sensitive and beautiful use of light and space.
Hugh Broughton's the one that does the Arctic Centre, is that right?
Oh, I don't know about that.
Yeah. And then he does home projects as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's quite, and that's really because it's whenever I go home, they've got a lovely cafe there, and I always go to the little cafe and have nice scones and cappuccinos.
That's something not many Scottish students would like to go to visit England. We would probably just go abroad if we were going
right,
anywhere,
yeah. And then
maybe it's worth our time to visit Nottingham and Oxford and Cambridge,
and then
places that where we just don't think.
And then another lovely building down in Oxford is by Niall McLaughlin Architects, is the Bishop Edward King Chapel. That beautiful with the beautiful timber. We went on a holiday with the kids and my partner. I've got an aunt who lives in Bath, and we did a little pilgrimage to that building, and we managed to get in one of the, because it's kind of a private chapel. It's not.
That's the one with the cross stones.
Yeah. And there was one of the monks or whatever was floating around. We managed to get a peep in.
Oh, fantastic!
So that was good. And the kids were like, "Oh no, not another building." Because my partner's also an architect at Page Park.
I see.
So all our holidays, we usually kind of end up having a little trip somewhere to see whatever buildings or art galleries
they
are.
And your kids artistic and are interested in it?
No, they're not. No, not in this. They are artistic, but they're not interested in being architects.
Nothing wrong with that.
And the last one as well, because I'm actually going on holiday with my daughter in October, for the October week, and we're going to go and see the Alhambra in Granada in Spain, which is the Moorish palace, it's got great gardens, and it's all very Moorish architecture with lots of mosaic and tiles and water gardens.
And does she know she's going there?
She knows she's going there, but generally we're going to be by the pool and on the beach, but we'll have one day when we go off and do some architecture.
It's nice and relaxing walking around and seeing some old buildings. Yeah. Okay, well that's us. Thank you very much for your time.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Problem. Thank you to Karen for joining us this week, and thank you all for listening. Next week we have Martin Lejak from InnoCAD, so make sure to tune in for that one. Thank you.